Welcome back to Paradise, Louisiana. On this week's show, we kick off a special feature that we did. We had Outdoor Writers Association members, Lyle Johnson, Joe Macaluso, Todd Masson, myself, and Gary Risponi, invited the 4 top gubernatorial candidates to come and address some questions pertaining to outdoor issues. And the first one that we started with was the red snapper. Red snapper, by the way, opens this week. So here's what the 4 candidates think about what needs to be done with the red snapper issue.
Joe Macaluso, the advocate, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Acadiana. After years of federal mismanagement of fisheries, clearly the people of our state and the people around the Gulf states want regional management, which means states taking ownership of reef fish management and other species in the Gulf of Mexico. As governor, how would you approach that and try to get regional management as part of the overall scheme of managing federal fisheries?
Well, certainly I support the regional management. When we take a look at the amendment that recently failed in Congress, that kind of takes it out of the Gulf of Mexico Fisheries Management Council and bringing it to a proposed Gulf States Red Snapper Management Authority, I'll believe in that. I think that's smart. So first, as a governor, I would actually support, I would lobby members of Congress and the U.S. Senate to make that the law of the land would be number one. Number two, I potentially intervene in the CCA lawsuit. I know there's a CCA lawsuit out there. I would have the state potentially intervene in that, make sure that we are appointing folks along the way to every commission that supports this kind of public policy. It's ridiculous when I think of, the fact that the population has in fact recovered, and yet when it comes to the ability to fish, we've got a limited number of days for our Louisiana fishermen, a couple fish as the limit. You can go out there and catch 2 fish in 10 minutes. The idea of 40 days for charter fishermen and 10 days for recreational fishermen just seems to me that we in the 5 states in the Gulf region between Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida could do a much better job of managing that resource. I think we got so much more skin in the game than a distant federal agency. So those are the kind of things I think that I would do to lead on. And I think that if we're able to provide that kind of leadership and we make it very clear that that's a priority, I'm hopefully that the rest of the nation, the decision makers who would have to amend some of the federal law to allow us to better do that, we could do it, because certainly what we have now is not working.
Well, it's become more and more apparent that NOAA, the National Marine Fisheries Service, have not been able to use good data to make their decisions. And I think this is somewhat of an easy question from my standpoint, in that I believe it ought to be left to the states and left to the regions to try and figure out how they're going to manage these fisheries. There's been the position of Louisiana and Texas has been upheld in the federal courts thus far. And I believe that's the idea and the concept that ought to carry the day going forward. As governor, I will do everything I can to try to prevail upon the powers that be to let Louisiana manage its fisheries, to let the region manage its fisheries instead of relying upon the data that's provided by NOAA, by the National Marine Fisheries Service, that has proven to be inadequate. And I support this concept, and I hope it's going to come about, because it's at the root of a lot of the conflicts that we have to see play out in Louisiana, because we're not relying upon good data. And we don't have good data, it's very difficult to make good decisions. And the department, I believe, is doing a good job in its role of collecting information and collecting data, and I believe would be in a much better position to manage some of the decisions that are being made, particularly as it affects recreational fishermen in Louisiana.
This is a critical issue today. As governor, I will work with the governors of the other Gulf Coast states, for example, to make sure that they are on board with a regional management approach, and that we have the ability to work together cooperatively to responsibly manage that resource. But you also have to have permission from Congress to do this, and they can override the rules that are coming out of the federal government with respect to the regulation of these fisheries. But the reason this is critically important is, for example, right now, tremendous disagreement between the state level folks and the national folks with respect to the red snapper situation in the Gulf, and with I think the season now in federal waters is only 9 days with a limit of 2 fish per fisherman per day. I know I've talked to a lot of folks at the state level who believe that that is actual mismanagement, and that the population of fish is such that it can be maintained with a much larger, I should say longer season. Maybe you could have a 40-day season with a 5 fish per day limit per fisherman. And so obviously this is a big deal. Tremendous disagreements with Mr. Crabtree from the federal government on this. I believe the state is in a position, working with other states, to do a better job of monitoring the situation in the Gulf to know what the fish population is, and would continue that monitoring throughout to make sure that it's not being depleted, and that the plans that we would come up with would actually be sustainable over the long term. This is another area where I think that we should be guided by science, and that a regional approach would certainly benefit all of the Gulf Coast states, but especially Louisiana. Again, we market ourselves as the sportsman's paradise, and one of the key things that we do is we offer fishing to folks, and that red snapper is a big deal. And as evidenced by the fact that in the state-controlled waters right now, we have a 6-month limit with fishing on 3 days. The limit is still just 2 fish per day. But obviously we can do better, I think, than the federal government, and I believe that we ought to work with Congress and with our partners in the other Gulf Coast states to make that happen.
Right. Joe, for years I've been frustrated by the feds being way behind the curve in terms of developing current numbers and science with which to manage our fisheries. NOAA and others at the federal level are using numbers that are clearly way outdated. And because of that, their federal management of the Gulf is, quite frankly, pathetic. We need to do better. That's why I've been the leader with regard to red snapper, to develop a whole new model based on state and regional fisheries management. And I have a bill that would transform that system, starting with red snapper. My bill is dedicated to red snapper, but it could be a model to go beyond that. And it would bring management to the regional level through a plan that would have to be developed together unanimously by all of the Gulf states. I'm making a lot of progress in the Senate passing that bill into law. I've been having meetings in the last several weeks with key senators, including the chairman of the committee. I'm second ranking on the committee. I feel good about our opportunity to move forward, but we need a new state and regional based model. Federal fisheries management, at least in the Gulf, has been completely inadequate, largely because they have not done the work, put the resources behind getting real-time, accurate numbers. Their numbers are way outdated.